Have you ever heard people say that Jesus was actually a failed revolutionary? That he tried to lead a revolt against Rome and got crucified for it? Let's take a look at these two clips of Ben Shapiro's take on Jesus, and then I'll share my thoughts.
What do you think he was? What do you guys think he was?
What do I think he was historically? I think he was a Jew who tried to lead a revolt against the Romans and got killed for his trouble, just like a lot of other Jews at that time who were crucified for trying to lead revolts against the Roman and got killed for their trouble.
I'm a Jew, so obviously for those who are not particularly versed in Judaism, the reason we're not Christians is because we don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah or a physical iteration of God. The option from within Judaism is to suggest that Jesus was actually a historical figure who was saying a lot of things that Jews would agree with, because if you read a lot of the New Testament, it, as you would expect, mimics a lot of the things in the Old Testament, and that he was actually a political figure, and that the Romans crucified him because he was a political figure who was attempting to lead a rebellion against their tyranny. That's the Jewish historical claim about Jesus.
Thanks, Ben.
So Ben Shapiro makes two main claims here, and both are completely unfounded. First, he says that Jesus was a failed revolutionary who tried to lead a revolt against Roman tyranny and was crucified for it. The evidence for this? None. No ancient source, Roman, Jewish, or Christian, supports that idea. And let's be honest, it makes no sense. Everyone knows that Jesus taught non-violence, love for enemies, turning the other cheek. So let me get this straight. He's delivering his Sermon on the Mount by day, preaching peace, and then by night he's secretly plotting an armed revolt against Rome. And then after his death, his disciples go out and lead a peaceful, non-violent movement that spreads across the empire. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Now, when Rome executed rebels, they wiped out their followers too. But after Jesus' death, his followers weren't hunted down as insurgents. They were arrested for preaching in his name by the Jewish Sanhedrin, but not for sedition. Even Rome's own historians, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Josephus, never accused Jesus of any political violence. If anyone would have mentioned it, they would have. They didn't. Now, Ben's second claim is even more staggering, that this supposedly represents the Jewish historical claim about Jesus. In reality, the revolt leader theory isn't Jewish at all. It's a modern idea that originated with the 18th century German thinker Hermann Samuel Rewire, one of the first skeptics to reinterpret Jesus as a political revolutionary. You see, Rewire lived during the Enlightenment, an age of reason and anti-clericalism and political revolution, and he projected those ideas back onto Jesus. This way of thinking gave rise to what later became known as the quest for the historical Jesus, the academic effort to separate the real Jesus of history from the Christ of faith. But the actual Jewish view of Jesus, as preserved in rabbinic and medieval sources, is something entirely different. Ben is a very sharp guy, so perhaps he didn't want to offend his largely Christian fan base. But you see, in the Babylonian Talmud, it says, on the eve of Passover, Yeshu, that is Jesus, was hanged. He was accused of sorcery and leading Israel astray. No mention of Rome, no mention of rebellion or political uprising. The charges are religious, not political. Later Jewish texts like the Toledot Yeshu, much later and polemical, echo the same theme, that Jesus performed magic, misled people, and was punished by Jewish authorities. Again, no revolt, no rebellion, no Roman trial. Even centuries later, Maimonides, one of Judaism's greatest rabbi philosophers, described Jesus in the same way. He asserted that Jesus was a failed Messiah who was executed by the court, the Jewish court, condemned by the sages for his false teachings, and that this was fitting punishment for him. So according to Maimonides, Jesus was not some Jewish braveheart, a revolutionary against Rome, but a figure who misled Israel in matters of faith. So when Ben calls this the Jewish historical claim, he's actually repeating a modern Enlightenment reinterpretation, not rabbinic tradition. The ancient Jewish texts describe a religious dispute within Israel, not a political uprising against Roman tyranny. The notion of Jesus as a political troublemaker tells us far more about modern skepticism and the politics that shaped it than it does about actual ancient history. The real evidence from both scripture and early Jewish writings paint a very different picture. Not a rebel against Rome, but a teacher who confronted hearts, not armies.